Hey y'all, so I got a comment on one of my YouTube videos the other day from Byron Argueta, and he wanted me to make a video on how I spool up my bait casters and spinning reels to prevent line twist. And I've never actually really thought about that before. I've been spooling up fishing reels for years, and I've never really had problems with line twist, and I think I've developed a pretty good system to actually spool a fishing reel pretty quick. So what I'm gonna do today is just show you how I spool my fishing reels, and hopefully it'll answer Byron's question and also give you a few ideas on how to maybe spool up your reels a little bit quicker, maybe save some line and save some money.
Okay, so assuming you already have a line on your bait casting reel, first thing you're gonna have to do is start pulling the line off. And when you do this, just tighten up your brakes on the side here so that you're not gonna get backlashes while you're pulling the line off, and then just start stripping the line. And then I'm gonna strip about 2/3 of the line off the spool, but I'm actually going to leave about 40 or 50 yards of line on the spool, and this is gonna be my backing. And the reason I'm leaving this backing on the reel is that I'm actually going to cut this line here. This is my main line.
And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to tie the end of my backing, which is on my bait casting reel, the end of my line here, to the new spool of line. So I'll just grab the end of the new spool of line here, and I'm going to connect these two lines together. And I'm gonna use a modified Albright knot for that. And I'll actually have a demonstration of how to tie that knot at the end of this video for those who are interested. It's my favorite knot for joining two fishing lines together.
And you're probably not gonna be getting down to the last 50 yards of your spool, or like the last third of your spool when you're fishing. And if you are casting down to your backing, it's probably time to put new line on your reel anyways. But again, using this backing, I save about 50 yards of new line every time I spool up my reel. And this lets me get about 3 bait casting reels worth of line out of one box or one 200-yard spool of this strand line. And if I was going to spool up this entire reel with brand new line, I probably only get 2 bait casting reels worth out of this box. But again, using this backing, I'll get 3, and that saves me a lot of money.
And a quick tip for the backing on your bait casting and spinning reels: never use braided line as your backing. For whatever reason, it just causes the line to slip, especially if you're tying braided line to monofilament or fluorocarbon, and the reel just won't cast very well in my experience. So always use monofilament or fluorocarbon backing. And if you're stringing up a brand new reel and it doesn't have backing on it because it's brand new, what I like to use is 25-pound Berkley Big Game. This is a really thick diameter line, 25-pound test, and you can buy a 600-yard spool of this line for like $6 or $7 at Walmart. And you can normally get 20 or 30 new reels worth of backing off of one spool. And I don't know too many people who are buying that many fishing reels in a year, so it'll last you a long time.
So now I've connected my spool of line to my fishing reel backing with that modified Albright knot. You can see that knot right there, and it just connects these 2 lines together. And then what you need to do is start reeling up this line onto your reel.
And one of the reasons why I think Byron might be having some issues with line twist on his bait casting and spinning reels is that when he's reeling up his new spool line onto his reel, he just takes the spool and puts it on the ground and just starts reeling.
And when you do that, that makes the line come on the spool really loose, and you can see right there it's just twisting all over the tip of the rod, and that just looks awful. I hate when I see that happening when I'm reeling up a new spool of line. That adds a ton of line twist, and it's just gonna make the reel cast really poorly. So what I actually do is I take off my shoe, and I'll put the shoe on the deck of the boat, and I'll actually put my spool of line into my shoe just like that. And this might look a little bit weird, but if you look here as I reel in my reel like this, and I reel on that new spool line, that line is coming off perfectly off of the spool. You'll notice that that line is in the spool, and as I'm reeling that line in, I'm not getting any line twist like I was last time. That line is coming in nice and smooth, straight off the spool, and you're not getting any twist when you're reeling on that new line.
And just a quick note, I wear size 12 shoes, and so if you wear like size 7s or size 16s, this trick might not work very well. But either way, you might just go to Goodwill and pick up a pair of size 12s for a couple dollars and use that as your line spooling shoe from now on. But this trick works really well. It prevents all of the line twists when reeling line off of a new spool, and it also makes it really easy. You don't have to come up with any crazy contraptions. I've seen people come up with these crazy like carpentry projects where they put like dowel rods or screws, things like that. But I mean, for me, just use the shoe. Works really easy, really fast, and it'll save you some time when you're spooling fishing reels.
So now my reel is fully spooled, and one thing you want to make sure you do is never over spool a fishing reel. You don't want to put too much line on a bait caster because that'll actually cause the reel to kind of lock up and you won't be able to turn the handle. So always leave just a little bit of the spool visible. You can actually see the edge of the spool when you spool up a reel. Leave a little bit of that edge visible and you're not going to have any issues. And some of you guys might be wondering why I'm using Stren line. It's maybe not the most popular fluorocarbon line out there, but I've used Stren 100% fluorocarbon for years. I really like this line, but I also have been experimenting recently with this Super FC Sniper from Sunline in the 16-pound test, and I really like this line. It's super strong. And also this Seagar Invisex. This is also a really good line. One thing that kind of scares people away from this Stren is that it's actually kind of like blue. It has this weird blue tint to it, so it's super visible to the human eye, but I've never had any problems with fish being scared by it. But you know, some people might be scared away by the color, but either way, all of these lines, the Stren, the Seagar, and this FC Sniper Sunline, they're all great fluorocarbons and they all work really well.
So that's how I spool up a bait casting reel, and it's pretty much the same procedure when I'm spooling up a spinning reel as well. I'll just strip off about half of the line off the spinning reel, and then I'll leave the other half as backing, tie on my new line to that backing, and then reel it up using the shoe technique, and that seems to work really well for me. But over the years, I've actually found that I get a lot of line twists when I use fluorocarbon or monofilament line as the main line on my spinning reels. And for whatever reason, on a spinning reel, line twist is just really bad. And so to prevent that, I've actually gone to using braided line as the main line on my spinning reel. And I use a couple different kinds. I'm using some Stren braid on this reel right here. It's like a white braid, which I kind of like. And then I've also used this spider wire braided line, and I normally use anything from 10 to 30 pound test braided line. 10-pound test is my favorite. And what I'll do is I'll spool up the entire spool with 10-pound braided line. Then what I'll do is I'll actually take a fluorocarbon leader of 8-pound test fluorocarbon, 6 or 8-pound test fluorocarbon, and I'll use that modified Albright knot to tie my main line, which is braid, to a leader of fluorocarbon.
Okay, so I just tied together those two lines using that modified Albright knot, and the reason I like that knot so much is that it's really strong, it's really easy to tie, and it also is really small. You can see that knot's just tiny and it goes through the guides really well. So now that I've tied my main line to my backing, I'm gonna try to make the leader about 30 or 40 feet long. So what I'll do is I'll actually put that spool on the ground, and since I'm just reeling up a little bit, I won't use the shoe technique, but I'm just going to reel up my leader actually onto my spool, and I'm gonna reel it about maybe 7 or 8 times onto the spool of this reel, and that's gonna give me about 30 or 40 feet of backing. Then I'll actually cut the line here and then tie my baits straight to this leader. And so again, I have braided line main line with about a 40-foot fluorocarbon leader.
And I've been using this setup with the braided line main line connected to the 40-foot fluorocarbon leader for about 2 or 3 years now, and I really like it. It's pretty much eliminated all of my line twist issues on spinning reels. I used to get a lot of bird's nests and a lot of line twists around the tip of my rod after I fished with a new spool line for like 2 or 3 trips, and so those problems are gone, and it just seems to cast a lot better, this braided line does. It'll cast further than straight fluorocarbon, and it's got a really good abrasion resistance to it, so if I'm fishing around boat docks and stuff, I can normally horse the fish out from under the dock with that braided line. And the reason I make my leader so long when I'm tying this fluorocarbon leader to this braided line is because, one, the longer the leader is, the less stress you're going to put on the actual knot that you tied the 2 lines together with, that modified Albright knot. If the leader is only 2 or 3 feet long, when you set the hook, that knot's going to be really close to the fish, and all that shock is going to be put right on the knot. And I used to have a lot of issues with my knot actually breaking on hook sets. And I also was using a couple different knots, like the double uni knot and a few others, and I was breaking off a lot of leaders on hook sets or just when I was fighting fish back to the boat, and it was really frustrating, and I almost gave up on using braided line on my spinning reels because of that. But once I switched to that modified Albright knot and started using a 30 or 40 foot leader, I haven't broken off on a hook set at all using this setup and using that knot. And the reason I like having such a long leader is that when you're fishing and you break off, during a tournament or a fishing day, normally you only break off a few feet of line when you do that, and so you can actually just retie onto that same leader, and you can use the same leader all day instead of having to tie a new leader on every single time you break off. You can use that same leader and kind of, break it down from 40 feet, maybe down to like 25 feet by the end of the day. But the fish don't seem to care if it's a 40-foot leader or a 3-foot leader in my experience. I mainly put the long leader on there just so that I don't break off as often and I don't have to retie that leader knot as often. So I just spent about 10 minutes trying to show you guys how to tie the modified Albright knot with this rope, and it doesn't look like I have a future in knot tying tutorials, unfortunately. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna leave a link to a video that explains how to tie that knot really well. It's actually the video I used to learn how to tie this knot, and I'll leave that down below in the description so you can check that out. I was just failing so hard with that explanation and tutorial, so you're probably better served watching this other video. So that's it for this video. I hope I shared a few tips you guys didn't know about on how to spool a fishing reel, and I hope I answered Byron's question about how to spool a fishing reel without getting a lot of line twist. And so if you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe down below, and leave a comment if you have any questions, or if you just want to let me know what you think about these tips. And also share the video with a friend if you think they'll enjoy it and maybe use that shoot technique themselves. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.